Good evening, friends. On today's CroneSpeak, you will not see the crone, only hear her. In fact, the crone has a speech writer today, who is the crone herself. On with the show then. Close your ears, plug in your preferred device and listen. This one is about coconut oil and home-baked cakes. I'm thinking about words like wholeness and wholesome. You hear the word wholesome a lot these days. Young people are very fond of using it, though I don't know just what they mean by it. We'll ask the young people. You can post in comments. Most of you know the crone is nuts about etymology. In fact, she did the deep delve and found that crones aren't those crooked-nosed, shriveled creatures that suck the life out of your babies. Being shriveled and crooked is a collateral. Didn't Bush teach us that word? Of living this earthly life for too long. As I've done, maybe. I won't call it a damage or a benefit. It can work both ways. Thanks to a skin ailment that got me in 2021, got me real hard, I find myself with shriveled skin in the winter of 2022. Cronehood? Not really. This too shall pass. I also find myself with an even bigger heart than I have ever known myself to have. And I'm needing to practice singing for 8 hours now so my rib cage can accommodate the growing heart size. To switch to the serious undertones of this speech, in 2017 December, I came to know of what was possibly my brother's terminal illness. I had met him in October and I knew all was not well. I just had the feeling that I wouldn't be seeing him again, but none of us admit this, do we? In November, he had wished me for my birthday, and his voice was very faint. But he said, "I'm fine." And I believed him. The agony of waiting helplessly needs an escape, and that escape found me in the form of a lost art that I had hoped to revive year after year, the lost art of baking. Now, I'm not trying to say I'm any kind of an expert cake maker. I can't even bake a loaf of bread. But yes, I make certain kinds of cakes, and those cakes are wholesome, very, very wholesome. In this crazy house, which is perpetually infrastructurally challenged, it's quite a job, putting one simple cake together. But in 2017, it happened, and I baked cake after cake after cake. I experimented with all kinds of flavors, and they all turned out quite delicious, really. People ate them and they enjoyed them and they said, "Oh well, this tastes good." And so it came to pass that my brother passed in January 18. All of 2017 December, I had been baking like a maniac, and I had been going on trails just to keep myself from becoming restless. And I went overboard with these trails after I lost him. And I have some of the most amazing trail pictures from the period immediately after he left. But we'll come back to that. In fact, it was very difficult, very challenging doing those trails, but I think those trails in some way kept my broken pieces together and made me feel whole. I had a knee injury, I had a back problem. With all that, I dragged myself around and went on those trails, and in some strange way, it helped. So I would say that these were two of the creative resources I dipped into. And this reminded me of coconuts. Coconuts were not that expensive back in the day. I don't mean 2017, but let's rewind to 1976. Hard times lead us to tap into our creativity. They really do. So, hard times are the times we need to heal from, and we find our wellspring of creativity at these times. We find solace in things we are in fact doing to counter an unexpected pocket pinch, just as I found solace in what I did to escape the pain of impending inevitable loss with no date or time attached to it. At such times of having to make do with less, which is what we went through in 76, we discover pathways to wholesomeness, which is a key ingredient of the wholeness I keep talking about. I still haven't got my head around a lot of contemporary jargon, so please do enlighten me on what you mean by wholesome. But for me, wholeness, healing is in fact connected to the word whole, and I'll come to the etymology in another of my audios, which are really proving more convenient than the videos because I record them and they upload very fast. Anyway, healing is about wholeness, and that's reserved for another day. But talking of coconuts, I have this fond memory of all the lovely creative things we would do when we had decided to go slow, go easy on buying stuff from outside, ready-made cakes, ready-made mishti, stuff like that. And we turned to all our knowledge of culinary knowledge, we pooled our skills together, and my dad was the expert at scraping coconuts with that good old-fashioned device, which was iron mounted on a wooden plank. And the one we had was somehow not very convenient. I found it a nuisance, but he would go on and on and on, and it was, he would do it steadily, rhythmically, and it was so soothing to him. I mean, he found solace in these things, and Mom and I would put our heads together, and Mom would keep talking about all kinds of recipes, wholesome ones that used jaggery in place of sugar and various other rustic ingredients, if I may say so. I mean, today jaggery costs twice as much as sugar and it's become like a luxury item, but it was significantly cheaper then. And she revived all kinds of recipes from her little collection, which she had inherited mainly from her aunt. Apologies for that sudden and very abrupt break mid-sentence. That was the caretaker knocking. That wasn't a piece of my ceiling clattering down. Don't worry. Another little piece did come down today, and or was it yesterday? But that's again the stuff for another day. Now coming back to coconut scraping and jaggery and healing and wholeness and what shall I call it? Wholesome food. I don't want to say healthy because that's become a very stereotyped word which tends to stand for certain things in certain people's minds, including mine. So we'll come back to our wholesome eats, wholesome homemade sweetmeats and cakes. And that's when we decided to dive big time into baking. We started off with a very simple recipe that my mother used. Since time immemorial, she would whip up a cake. And then we started improvising on it. And then I went overboard, putting all kinds of things into it. And within a year, I had been turning out all kinds of cakes, and this neighbor of mine who had uh, a very, shall I say, who had very fine-honed taste, sampled those cakes, and then he would come snooping by for more, and he said, "You should go into business. This is so good, it's professional." Well, idiot me. That's as much business as I have in my head. Well, at least I brought some wholeness not only to our family but to the neighbors as well. And I believe that sharing homemade cake is something that keeps a family together. And these cakes they went on after that as a tradition year after year. And it was for Christmas and birthdays, and mainly for Christmas. And we started getting better and better at it. And at some point, I was the one who took over and started doing it. And this went on for quite a while. I mean, I think this went on till the year my father passed. And after that, we carried on for a couple of years, my mother and I. And I have very poignant memories also of the last piece of cake that Dad ate. And that brings a lump to my throat. That was cake made by me, and we shared it with visiting friends. And in fact, the friend who visited us, he doesn't eat eggs. And when I offered him cake, he asked, and he said, "This must be having egg in it." And I said, "Yes." And then he said, my mother asked, "Don't you have eggs?" And he said, "No, I'm vegetarian." And then he said, "But no, you have offered it with so much grace that I will not say no, I will eat it." And he ate it and he relished it. And that's when probably the last piece Dad had in his company. Or maybe he had a piece the next day. But that was it. So these memories keep coming back. And then for Christmas, we would put all sorts of things together and whip up some mincemeat. And I have to say that we didn't do this from a year in advance and that sort of thing. Initially we did it just a few days before we wanted to make the cake. And then we went on with it. Year after year, we became smarter at it. And I remember once we kept it for a whole year and we took it around the country also when we traveled, because we were kind of worried about what would happen to it if we just left it lying at home outside the fridge. And as it had been with us for quite a while and we had refrigerated it, our horrible monsoons here in this city, everything catches mold, and we took it with us. And well, that's again stuff of another tale. We'll keep that for another day. And so we really became good at this and carried on with this for quite a while. And then one year, I don't know what happened, I wanted to make a cake and my mother was somehow very reluctant. I gathered all the ingredients together, kept them, and somehow I just didn't get down. We didn't get down to making it. And after that, I don't know what happened to us. It's those ingredients stayed quite a while with us. And finally, they grew old and we threw them out. And the very next time I suggested making a cake to her, she was quite, she was quite put off. I don't know what it was in her head. There are some phases in our lives, when there's a force inside us that also moves us away from this wholesomeness, and we start moving away from some of the lovely things we used to do. And then the practice just died out. And one Christmas, I got cake from some shop and she ate it and she said, "It's nice, but it's nothing like what you make." And I really lost my head at her. I said, "Who stopped me from making it?" But then I ask myself now, how can anyone stop you from doing something? I mean, why did I stop? Because she was reluctant. I should have just gone on with it, been determined. I mean, take what lesson you want from this, what message you want from this. But I would say, don't stop because somebody is reluctant. And don't become reluctant. Keep going, keep the momentum up. Even if you take a brief break, don't do it with a heavy heart or, feeling some reluctance in your mind. Take a break because you're tired. Maybe you want a break, but then come right back to it. It's a skill or a talent that you have. And to think I had to come back to it to use it as a healing device, because I was it was my comfort, it was my solace at that time. So you heard this, and I spoke to you about coconuts. Well, I have a lot to say about coconuts and coconut oil, but I will wind this up now because it's perhaps one of the longest ones I've done. And I'll have to stitch these parts together and put it up for all of you to enjoy. And maybe I'll upload a picture of a coconut for you to enjoy. Well, cheers then. Think about all this and post your comments. I miss hearing your voices. Please do weigh in with what you think about all this. I enjoy doing CroneSpeak. I enjoy being a crone. I also enjoy being a pretty dressed up crone, which I promise I'll treat you to that in next week's edition of CroneSpeak. We are already late with this one. So take care, everybody. Good night.